Hello and welcome to Matt and Mike Pull Focus. I'm Mike.
And I'm not.
And today we're going to be talking about the 1980 John Landis horror comedy, An American Werewolf in London. So Matt, I have been round to your house and there is a gigantic poster of American Werewolf in London in your kitchen. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. I'm really looking forward to talking about this. This is one of my favourite movies, and this is also, I'd like to point out, the first episode that we have done remotely. We are in separate locations at the moment due to the continuing coronavirus isolation rules. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we've not completely fallen into alcoholic delirium just yet, but this can of Foster's right here is just going to help me get through today and every other day. Got
a vodka and Coke on this side, and this is our first podcast brought to you by Skype. So that's good to know. Oh.
Well, enjoy, Mike, and let's proceed, shall we?
Shall we?
This movie was scared me to death when I was a child.
In a good way?
Absolutely. At the time, no. I guess it was incredibly... It gave me nightmares for months, actually, when I first watched it. Basically, I'd watched, when I was a kid, I'd watched Disney's Peter and the Wolf, and there was certain bits in that, that just scared me half to death. So I always had this kind of, fear of, the wolf creature. It just kind of scared me. And in that Disney movie, it seemed kind of supernatural, even though it wasn't. And there was some... Obviously, the whole thing of Peter and the Wolf is the sort of dramatic, scary, and emotive music cues.
Yeah,
and the wolf's theme and thing is just so terrifying, that sort of really deep, low, brooding sort of evil theme. So that I always thought that wolves were in some way evil and nasty and out to get me. So that was going on in my sort of psyche.
Yeah.
And then one day when I think I was about 8 at the most, I think probably about 8 years old.
You were 8 when you watched this film.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you insane?
Well, I wasn't until I watched it. But I went up to my parents had a sort of a converted attic room that was full of VHS tapes lining the wall.
Yeah.
And one of them said it was recorded from TV and it was written in biro and it said An American Werewolf in London. And I just remember the word wolf stood out to me and I just was intrigued. So I grabbed the tape, ran downstairs to my mum and I said, Mum, can I watch this, please? And she was like, no, absolutely not. It's too scary. It's, a horror movie. You can't watch this. And, I begged her all day. I said, please, please, please. And she was like, no. And then finally she sort of caved and said, oh, well, ask your dad when he gets home. So I literally went, Dad knocks on the door. And I was like, Dad, can I watch this film? And he's like, yeah, I don't see why not.
That's how easy it was.
Literally, because I think that, obviously in retrospect, he thought it was funny. Which because he probably saw it, when he was, in his early 30s.
Yeah, not enough to scare him.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, or not enough to, really see, because they'd let me watch things like, Life of Brian, and they were, reasonably liberal parents in terms of what they let us watch.
I wasn't even allowed to watch Friends until I was 12. So this is shocking to me.
Well, your parents were ahead of their times because of the homophobia.
Yeah, they knew how.
Nobody else noticed. But your parents, they knew what was going on.
Yeah, they were woke. They were woke before it was woke. Yeah, definitely. But now I've just got this image of 8-year-old Matt just going into his bedroom with Wolf from Gladiator posters on his wall, listening to Wolves of London or something like that. And yeah,
it was that kind of obsession with things that scared me, though. I think that thing where you're sort of scared to look, but you have to look. Kind of thing, and it didn't go quite as far as wolf pajamas or any interesting gladiators whatsoever.
No slippers with wolf heads on, nothing.
No, but always that thing where I just kind of knew that was the thing that scared me most, and then obviously when I got to that age and I saw this tape, I was like, I just have to see this. It's there's something about this, that's just intrigued me, and to put it in some kind of context, next to that was The Fly, was a tape labeled The Fly. And I remember I can't remember if it was before or after, but I'd asked them if I could watch that and they both said, no, absolutely not. So
thank God they had a line.
Yeah, exactly. And that's for another podcast, but I remember thinking, God, this has got to be good. If this Fly movie, which, and that has turned into one of my favorite horror movies.
And now we seem to just have a bigger picture and better picture of how this made you into the man you are today with your love for horror films. And this seems like a nice free therapy session where you just retrogradingly like, experiencing this all again. Like, this is where it all started. My God.
Yeah. And believe me, I've thought about this a lot, and it's something that rattles through my head a lot. And the nightmares have subsided, but the occasionally, like even now in my early 30s, I'll get once a year I'll get a werewolf nightmare, which will chill me to the bone. I'll wake up, like terrified. There's something. Yeah, like not that often, luckily, but it does still happen.
You mentioned this when I think you took me to see The Howling at one of our local cinemas, and you stated how for me Alien films always send the shivers up my spine, and for you it's werewolves. And I think you may have mentioned this in a previous episode of
yeah. And I remember you saying that. So with you, was it Alien as in things like Signs, or like as in Alien the Xenomorph, or like
we don't have to make this about me if you don't want. We can save this for another episode. But
okay, that you piqued my curiosity there, because I do remember you mentioning that, but we didn't really go into detail.
Oh yeah, there's stories I could tell you, just not about me and aliens, but like watching scary films. Like I think it was like Invaders from Mars or something like that, where like a UFO crashes over the horizon of this kid's like bedroom window, and you can see people disappearing into the sand, and then they get taken over like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And and then I saw Signs when I was like still a youthful
Signs
teen.
is scary, man. Like Signs is a really scary
it's
film.
It's got some really like terrifying visuals, and M. Night Shyamalan can do that really well. And
do you know what else really freaked me out?
Hitchcock's
actually, there was another great example of like alien, movies that really scared me as a child was War of the Worlds. The original War of the Worlds movie from like the 1950s.
Yeah, not only that, but like my parents played me the the stage production and like
the Orson Welles thing.
Not the Orson Welles one, but the one with like the Striders and like the radio opera. Not the one from like the 20s or something, but something like the 70s one that's got like loads of like bombastic music and theremins.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I'm not aware of that one
as well. So
really?
much so I couldn't even listen to Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys in the car ride to school the next morning because theremin music made me like have some kind of PTSD moment. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah,
so imagine that, deep. But with werewolves. Yeah, that's me. That's where I am. Yeah.
Good to know that we've got one thing that is completely irrational fear.
Yeah.
Between us. Although I still say that mine could happen. But anyway, carry on with your werewolves.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it all began. And I remember, we got this VHS tape, and I got like, my brother, and he got like a couple of older sort of friends of ours, together. And I think there was about 4 or 5 of us in the room.
Yeah.
And the movie started, and I genuinely thought when I first put the VHS in, and it starts with that, is it not Sam Cooke's Blue Moon, but the version of Blue Moon that plays over the credits. I can't remember who the artist was, but and the shots of the moors, which are really sort of underexposed and really dark and like brooding. I was like, I've got the wrong film. Like I genuinely thought. Someone's taped over this with some lame like documentary about the Yorkshire Ripper or something.
Yeah.
And then it was only like 20, 30 seconds later that the title came up, and I was like, oh, I've got this is the right movie. So that immediately shows that played with my expectations of what a horror film should be, which, it shouldn't have Blue Moon playing over the title. That's, for a start. So even as a kid, I knew something was different here. Something, interesting was happening.
Yeah, because it's a very tongue-in-cheek film, would you say? It winks at the audience, I should say, knowingly a lot about like lots of songs about moons and the fact that they turn up in a lamb cart or like a sheep
truckload of sheep. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, they are figuratively lambs to the slaughter already, and there's lots of knowing nods. I feel in this.
Yeah, they're dead. They're dead from the first frame, basically. Like there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And the best description that I heard John Landis say when he was trying to pitch it to people, because he wrote the script for American Werewolf London in 1969 when he was 18, 19 years old, and he was working as a runner on the set of Kelly's Heroes. Did you ever see that movie?
I haven't, but I have heard about it, and I know about it. And I didn't know he was a runner on that. That's insane to think.
He's got quite an amazing career, actually, in terms of stuff that he did, before he was a director even, when he was a kid.
Yeah.
He worked in the mailroom of 20th Century Fox, and then he went on to work as a stuntman on Sergio Leone movies and, falling off horses and doing all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And he was in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, working on Kelly's Heroes. And he tells this story. I must tell it. It's just too good not to tell. He and this other guy, they used to call themselves schleppers. I don't know why, but that's kind of like the old-fashioned term for a runner on an American set. And so they were schlepping about one day, and they were driving a Jeep through like a small rural town, just pick up some supplies or what have you. And the locals, these sort of poor peasant folk, were having a funeral. And what they were doing was they had a body wrapped in a shroud, and it was wrapped also with like rosary beads and garlic and like, all these kind of like strange, sort of mementos wrapped around it. Yeah. And they were burying him in a really narrow grave, feet first, almost like a well, in the middle of a crossroads. And so they witnessed this burial. They had to stop the Jeep and sit there for half an hour or whatever it was to let the funeral happen. And apparently the bloke next to him was laughing his head off, saying these poor stupid peasants, look how stupid they are. And apparently John Landis said in that moment he thought, there must be a reason for this. Like, why are they doing this to this guy?
What kind of ritual are they in the middle of?
Yeah, exactly. What is this? So his curiosity was piqued. And he asked one of the locals, he said, like, what are you doing here? Like, what's all this about? He said, well, we're doing this so he doesn't get up and cause mischief after he's died. He said, why would he do that? He said, well, he's a murderer. So if we don't do this, then he will get up and, and murder again or whatever. And right. So, and apparently all this time, the runner, in the back of the Jeep is laughing his head off. He just thinks it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And in this moment, John Landis thought, well, what if he did get up? How would we react in that moment to this thing that's clearly not true and clearly stupid and superstitious? If it does happen, how do you deal with the supernatural when it's standing right in front of you?
Yeah.
That's his whole sort of thesis for the movie.
Yeah, I do like that aspect of it. The whole, well, I mean, I know it comes from a bit of a, oh, look at these silly Northerners from a Londoner's point of view, a Southerner's point of view, or something like.
Exactly.
We've all got like rituals and beliefs, like with the pentagram up in the corner of the slaughtered lamb. But no, I like that idea about like you just like witnessing a ritual that may have some background to it, but you don't know because you're just passing through. I think that's a really interesting idea.
And that kind of goes into the script, but it's also just the thought of like, how do two normal, rational guys deal with something that is supernatural when it's clearly not true? So it's like, it's that thing of like, another way to sort of think of it is kind of like, it's like the Abbott and Costello thing of like laughing over your shoulder at something. You're in the old dark house, you hear a noise and you go, the
nervous laughter.
It's not a vampire or a werewolf or a, Frankenstein's monster, but, there's part of your mind that goes, that is scared, even though it's irrational. And it's that whole thing of like, when we'll deal with this later, but when David comes back from the dead, Jack comes back from the dead to visit David, he just says, "Get the hell out of here!" Like, this isn't real. There's no way that for not one moment does he actually think that this is actually real. He keeps saying, "I'm dreaming. This can't be true." It's like.
But that's what I like is like Jack is just saying like, "Oh, grow up," or "Don't be a
come
putz,
on,
David." And it's just like, this is real. Get over it. Don't like it's still the
power of
idea
darkness.
of,
it's all true. He says it's all true.
Yeah, and just the idea of like, sod it. You're in this story now. This is how things are. But like, it would be how a realistic or rational person like you or me would behave in that kind of situation. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what gives it that kind of realism. And I think when you mentioned the other night when we were rewatching it that when Jack appears to him in the hospital room for the first time, undead, there's no sting or kind of like jump scare or anything like that. He's just there.
Just, very matter of fact. It's just the fact that you see finally what David's so scared at, and it's Jack just standing there.
So American Werewolf in London is the story of two American backpackers who are backpacking through the Yorkshire moors when they are attacked by a werewolf.
Of all the places, the Yorkshire moors is where they decide to start their European tour.
Yes.
Of all places.
It's actually filmed in Wales, but however, it's meant to be Yorkshire. But apparently, the most people executed in history, in recorded history for being quote unquote werewolves, the most people executed are in France and in Wales.
Really?
And that's a fact. Yes. On the ledgers, that's where the most people have been executed for that type of witchcraft.
Oh, I miss the good old days where you could kill someone and just the reason is like werewolf.
Witch. Yeah, werewolf.
Yeah, just thought they were a werewolf. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, better off without him now. Better safe than sorry.
Like, bring out your dad. It's like, I'm not dead. Jack is killed outright by the wolf, and David wakes up injured in hospital several weeks later, where he has to try and sort of convince the doctors and the police around him that what attacked them was indeed a wolf creature rather than just an insane escaped lunatic. Yeah. So that's basically where how the story kicks off, and so. Yeah, Mike, you had seen this film before, hadn't you? But I don't think you'd seen it as many times as I have. This is one of my favourite films of all time, probably only second to There Will Be Blood. So I've probably seen this, upwards of 50 or 60 times, I think, at least.
Yeah, I'd say when I first saw this, it was a similar situation to when I saw films like, I don't know, Napoleon Dynamite. It's a weird kind of comparison, or like The Shining, where I didn't really know what I was watching at first. It was dealt in such a double-handed way of like comedy and horror at the same time that I went into it thinking it was going to be straight horror. But when the comedy elements came into it, I didn't know how to react to it. And I was just like, my mind went to, this film doesn't know what it wants to be, rather than it's definitely handling both. I was like, same with Napoleon Dynamite. I was like, is this a comedy? Am I supposed to be laughing at this poor child who seems to be bullied at school for being a bit of a, And,
I do know what you mean, actually. Like, I think that, it doesn't immediately come to you, especially with Napoleon Dynamite as well. I kind of felt the same, and now I think it's hilarious.
Exactly. So on second and third and fourth rewatches of American Werewolf, I can see that it's, the comedy elements in the comedy parts, and the horror elements in the horror parts, and I feel like maybe they're a bit drastic, going from a talking zombie to like Nazis gunning down your whole family, but
It's tonally, it's interesting, like, because Landis describes it as a horror movie. He says it's not a comedy; it's a horror movie that has characters that occasionally do funny things in it, and I think that's. And also, it's like, he said when he was trying to get it made, this is in 1980-81, when he finally sort of got the budget and tried to get a studio to sort of to finance it. Sorry, to get the budget to get it made. He said that like people were like, "What is this? Like, is it a horror or is it a comedy?" Yeah. Like, this is too funny to be scary, or it's too scary to be funny. There was nothing in between, and so he had great difficulty. It took him from writing it to getting it made. It took 10 or 11 years to get it done, and so that just shows how kind of it really I think studios like to pigeonhole things into genres, and if they can't quite tell what it is, what genre it is, they won't go near it with a barge pole.
No, of course, he ended up kind of challenges the standards and the norms, and something that is like able to be both horror and comedy is just like, but how will we market this? How will, like, which audience will we pitch it to? Because there's got to be one more than another. So yeah, I can understand.
But he ended up making it through this this deal, which was called a negative pickup, which I'd never heard of the concept before. But it's basically you raise the money. So in this case, it was $10 million. So you raise the money to make the movie through bank loans and so on. Right. Then you have absolute final cut, and when you deliver the movie to the studio, it was Universal Studios, we will give you $10 million back and a percentage of the profits. So it's basically like a way of the studio kind of like ensuring a product.
Yeah.
So they agree to him making a movie on these terms, and he makes that exactly as he said he would. Gives it, and so it was a way of kind of getting a movie as less compromised, because you could basically agree the outline and they would leave you alone and let you make it
these days.
Yeah, I know, right?
If just like studios had more faith in filmmakers to handle a project without interference, that would be amazing. Especially if like they were saying, okay, it's your money. If it is a success, we'll pay you, and just allowing them to create something that's going to find an audience. And
it's kind of similar to the Blumhouse model in terms of like, I think it's a $7 million budget now, but like when they first started, it was a $5 million budget. And what it was that they would give you a $5 million budget to make your movie as long as you agreed to, or you fit into a couple of terms, one of which was you directed a movie before, right. You stayed within the budget, and it had to be a horror movie, and that was it. So that's why you get that. That's part of the reason why we've had such a sort of a resurgence of great horror movies in the last 10, 15 years.
Jason Blum is like to be celebrated, I suppose, for that. But like with every amazing Get Out or Happy Death Day, you still get the Truth or Dares and the Witcher puns, and
exactly. Exactly.
So it's gonna be producing both the hits and the flops, but at least they're out there. At least like I know of Wish Upon and I know of Truth or Dare, and at least like awful films are still like able to be watched at parties and laughed at rather than laughed with. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I think absolutely, it's a great way to be, because you are going to get some like trash, but you're also going to get some gold as well. And it's the way of doing it, like not having such a committee sort of vibe to movies where because that's the way you end up with The Mummy, with Tom Cruise. That's how that happens.
Yeah. Speaking of The Mummy, just every time I watch American Werewolf, I'm just outraged by how much they lift. Have you seen the Tom Cruise Mummy?
I've seen bits of it. I was warned away from it, so I thought I'd give it a chance. I watched about 40 minutes.
I'm just glad you mentioned
bored,
it. Yeah.
Really bored.
But did you see up to where they just take off the whole Griffin Dunn, like Jack appearing as the dead best friend?
No, I didn't actually. No.
Yeah,
oh my god! So they actually
do that
did a rip off of Werewolf.
Yeah, not to spoil the Tom Cruise awful Mummy, but do you ever watch New Girl? It's Nick from New Girl is his best friend.
Oh yes, yeah. My wife watches New Girl, so I know it quite well.
So him and Tom Cruise are just like this buddy comedy thing at the beginning, and then like he dies in a plane crash, but then like Tom Cruise keeps seeing him everywhere as like a slowly decaying dead body. And no one else is able to see him. He's cracking wise and saying like, stop freaking out. I'm here. This is what I'm doing. And it's like, oh my God, you are just doing American Werewolf. I know that you own it because you're both Universal properties, but come on, give me a break. Have some kind of ingenuity.
Did they do it in any kind of stylish way? I mean, did they do it, where it was creepy or disturbing? Or
there's one interesting scene where Tom Cruise goes into the bathroom and sees Nick in the reflection, and then
American Werewolf.
Well, yeah, exactly. But then Nick appears like through the glass and like on the opposite side, talking through it. So it becomes like a mirror instead of a.
Okay.
Sorry, it becomes like a window instead of a mirror, and like that's an interesting thing. But apart from that, absolutely nothing at all. I can't. Right. Oh God, The Mummy was such a bad start to the dark universe, and I'm glad it's no longer happening. Anyway,
I know it was just so boring as well. I just remember thinking, like, what is this? Like, this is
the same about the Wolfman, the Wolfman, all one word, the Benicio del Toro one. Did you ever see that back in like 2012 or whatever?
Yeah, and I was super excited, about that. Anything with the sort of Wolfman title. I knew Rick Baker was attached to, who's the sort of Oscar-winning makeup artist who did American Werewolf in London back in '81. Yeah, he was attached to it, so I thought this is going to be really interesting. And it was just, again, really, really dull, and it looked very, it was expensive, it looked kind of, it looked really kind of, polished and everything, but there's no, I mean, only like, Anthony Hopkins could make that dialogue like interesting, like it was like, he almost saved it, just because there's some great performances in that film, but no,
Hugo Weaving in that as well, I find is really entertaining. Just because
they got the most watchable actors, didn't they?
Yeah, but how do you screw up Benicio del Toro as the Wolfman? That should be amazing. It should be instantly watchable, and just turns out to be pile of sludge.
For anyone who is a our avid podcast listener, there's Mark Maron does the WTF podcast, and Rick Baker's sort of been doing the rounds over the last few months because he's retiring essentially. And he tells some amazing stories on the WTF podcast and about the Wolfman. I won't go into it here because there's some long stories, but about the production and how hellish it was.
I'll check that out.
Long story short, they basically didn't want any practical effects in it, even though Rick Baker did loads of them. And basically all the scenes that you see that are overly CGI'd were all done practically first and then basically wiped out. Just like, they just replaced it with CGI stuff. And, CGI, when it's done well, has its place, and it's an amazing tool, and it can be used so well. But this was just, again, a completely missed opportunity in that respect. And, it's a great interview if you want to listen to that at some point.
Oh, no, I'll check it out. But that reminds me of, like, the Thing prequel remake thing that they did in 2011, and they had such fantastic like not visual effects, like practical effects, that they decided to just forego and go with the VFX route. And it was such a bad decision when you've got such fantastic things that still can be done really well. Because I mean, the one scene that everybody talks about in this, and I think is one of your favorite scenes, is the werewolf transformation scene, right?
Oh yeah, I think that's I mean, most people know that scene. I think even people who haven't seen the movie, just have seen clips of that scene. It's so iconic, and
it comes out of nowhere, doesn't it?
It does, and that's what's kind of so creepy about it. Like we were talking about Jack's appearance before and how kind of understated it is.
Yeah.
David is just like pacing the apartment and sits down in a chair to read a book. We cut back to him, and Sam Cooke's Blue Moon is on the radio, and he just suddenly just shouts Jesus Christ, and he's on the floor and transforming. There's no kind of creepy dramatic build up to it, quite the opposite. It's just
because when when I was watching it again for this conversation, it took me by surprise. I was like, it's happening now, because there was nothing like foreboding, there was nothing foreshadowing or anything. It was just the fact that it's getting to be nighttime, and then suddenly Jesus Christ,
and he's just reading a book, isn't he? And it just flies, and it's that kind of thing where I can't think of a better way of doing it. Like it's just like I suppose the one way you could have him start to feel ill or something and go to the mirror in the bathroom.
A deterioration or something,
Yeah, like the fly, like Jeff Goldblum, maybe do it a little slower, like looking in the mirror, looking at his eyes. But the way it just is, like you said, so sudden, it's just like, no bullshit, let's just get into it. Like that's it's like an attack of, like a heart attack or something. It just happens like so quickly, and it's and that's terrifying to me. And a brilliant thing I heard about the transformation scene, which is just a small detail, which I think it was really well put. I was listening to an interview with Joe Dante, who's the director of The Howling, and he was saying that the scariest shot in the transformation is the cutaway to Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse doll, because it's partially funny, but it also just shows that this thing is happening to you, and your apartment is just still the same around
nothing
you.
is changing apart from you. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Even though your entire world is being flipped upside down, nothing is really changing, yeah.
And I thought that was quite a brilliant observation, because that jump cut always kind of made me laugh or nervously laugh. Yeah. But then that's a really good, why it's there. Like, there's a great reason why it's there. It's just to show that Disneyland still exists. Yeah. This is happening to you,
Yeah.
And
Mickey can't save you here. There is there is no happiness. There is no happy ever after. This is absolutely excruciating, and he is going to go through the most painful transformation of his life. Yeah.
And I think I don't think his performance is talked about enough, because he's not, a very celebrated actor. He'd done some Dr. Pepper adverts before this, and then went on to have a really kind of not a great career in film. Like, he appeared in a few movies. He was in an Amityville sequel that I tried to watch. I think Amityville 7 or 8. I tried to watch, and it was just really terrible.
They're up to 7 or 8?
Oh, man. I thought this is back in the early 90s. Yeah, God knows what they're on now in terms of numbers. But anyway.
They're rebooting it, I think, aren't they?
Again?
I think so.
With Ryan Reynolds again? Or
No, brand new actors, and I think it might be Blumhouse, I think.
All right. I take it back.
So
okay.
You never know these days. Flip a coin, yeah.
Blum is
going to be good or bad.
Seal of approval. I'm down with it. Candyman's been moved to due to coronavirus. The release of Candyman has been moved to the 24th of September, I believe, or around that time. Okay. So that's a shame. I was very much looking forward to seeing that, and I was hoping for an early release on digital download, but it looks like it is going to be a cinematic release. So they've stuck to the guns on that one.
Yeah, fair enough. It's going to be great to see in the cinema, I'd say.
Oh, I can't wait.
Are you excited for this potential remake of American Werewolf in London?
Well, this has been going on it's been talked about for a long, long time.
It's been in development hell for a while, isn't it?
Yeah, at least as far back as 2009, I believe.
Really? Has it been that long?
Probably further, actually. I think because there's several stories. I'm not particularly clued up on it, although I have heard a lot of stories from, a lot of interviews from directors and people who were possibly attached at one point.
Yeah.
At one point or another. The earliest, there's a few great kind of anecdotes I heard. One was from Edgar Wright, which was fantastic.
Oh, really? So Edgar Wright was tapped to direct the remake?
Yeah, so the story goes, apparently, that he was approached by John Landis in about 2008, 2009, and Edgar Wright was obviously a huge, director by this point, and he'd done, Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, and had he done your favourite, what movie? It's called Scott Pilgrim?
Scott Pilgrim? Scott Pilgrim would have been the year after this, 2010.
Yeah, okay, so he was really hot director anyway, and a huge American Werewolf in London fan. He was just like, super fan, talks about it all the time in like interviews and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, John Landis was a big fan of his and came up and said like, I think you should be the one to direct this movie. Like, I'm producing it. It's at Dimension right now. We can start developing it. And apparently Edgar Wright had, which I can imagine, the most difficult conversation that you could ever have with one of your idols, which was, why would I want to remake my favourite film?
Yeah, I think I remember him saying about this now, and it's a very good argument to make.
Yeah.
If you're such a fan of it, why would you why would you attempt to try and better it?
What could you possibly do that would, it's that thing of, I imagine it would probably be the most amazing moment like of your life to be asked to do that, but at the same time it's like, this is something that if you put it on such a pedestal and it back to front, inside out, what are you going to do? Like, that's going to...
Well, exactly, yeah. I imagine Edgar Wright would be really good if he were to do like an homage, like Shaun of the Dead is to zombies, like if he did a werewolf homage film or something where someone else goes through the werewolf process, but the same two people going on the Yorkshire moors getting attacked and doing stuff. Yeah, if Edgar Wright did it, it'd just be shot for shot, the same way that if I tried to do Memento or Scott Pilgrim, there's no way I could do it better than Chris Nolan or Edgar Wright.
Also, like, you could argue that, if you love a movie that much, there's nothing more to say. That's why you love it, because it says it all, and it's so perfect and complete. So I mean, a sequel maybe, or I was thinking, the other day when we were rewatching it, I was thinking a cool prequel might be the story of the werewolf who gets shot and killed by the villagers at the beginning.
Yeah, at the beginning, the Yorkshire one. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what the title would be, but it would be a Yorkshire werewolf in Yorkshire.
A Lancashire werewolf in Yorkshire. Yeah. War of the Roses.
He was a man.
Bringing it all back. Shoot him. Yeah. Was he a werewolf? Don't know. He was a man.
He back on pretty airy, that guy at number 3.
Although, like, saying about remakes, I'm pretty sure I would do a better remake of Oldboy than Spike Lee did.
Yeah, I think anyone would make a better. It's like...
just wanted to twist that knife once again.
It's like he tried to do a bad job. It's so bad. It's so bad it's purposefully bad. Like...
And if you want to hear more about our thoughts about the Oldboy remake, go watch Matt and Mike Paul Focus's review of Oldboy.
Get them hits up.
And there's another plug in there. Yeah, beautiful.
That was one sort of story behind the remake. So that didn't completely squash it. Then there was a director who made a movie, I believe was called Hatchet. Have you heard of that movie?
Oh yeah, I had heard that. I've heard it's like a nice independent one, but I haven't actually seen it. But I've heard it's like a mockumentary or a faux documentary. About, like interviewing a serial killer.
Yeah, and it's like you say, it's kind of a low budget movie, and it was very, very successful. And that I forget the name of the director of that, the bloke who made Hatchet, but he was approached, and this is a great story. So he was approached by Dimension. I don't know whether it was before or after Edgar Wright, but around the same time. And he had this meeting at Dimension, so things, development hell had obviously started to happen. Where he sat down, he said, and they said, "So, we love your movie, Hatchet. We think it's great. We love it because it's kind of funny and it's a horror movie." And he's like, "So that's why we want you to write and direct the remake of An American Werewolf in London." And he's like, "Wow, great, amazing." And they said, "Few things. Firstly, they have to be sexy female backpackers." And apparently he was like, "Okay, fair enough. We'd probably expected that." Okay. Second of all, it can't have any werewolves in it. It's got to be a rage virus. And he was like, "Okay." Thirdly, it can't be funny. And he's like, "Well, you said that you brought me in here because you liked my funny movie." And
they wanted a remake of American Werewolf with no werewolves.
No werewolves.
And it being 28 days later.
Female protagonist, which is fine. And
rage.
And and
rage
not funny. and not funny at all. Right. Like, I mean, that's, I suppose, the Evil Dead remake is not funny.
I was just about to say, that's more serious.
And I don't think that was entirely unsuccessful. I think I quite enjoyed it, actually. But it is... I liked it because it wasn't the original. It was different in the way that it was serious, and it wasn't really tongue-in-cheek. So similarly, some elements of that could be interesting, but yeah, no werewolves, a rage virus, and it's called An American Werewolf in London.
Why not just make a sequel rather than remake it under the guise no werewolves?
So that gives you a little insight into what was kind of going on back then in 2009, 2010. And from then on, I think Max Landis, John Landis' son, was attached at one point, and he's been a naughty boy.
Yeah, well, that's one way of saying it. That he's a manipulative son of a bitch. I'm so gutted. I was such a big fan of Max. I bought his comics. I watched Dirk Gently. He's a really big wrestling fan, so he does loads of wrestling stuff on YouTube. And I was a really big fan.
That was a pretty dark awakening for you to find that out, that one of your idols.
I was just like, oh, this sucks. I can't like any of my stuff. And it's like, same with Spacey, same with, I don't know, the film Usual Suspects, like Bryan Singer directed, Kevin Spacey's part in it. I'm like, can I watch that anymore? American Beauty, can I watch that anymore? It's like, it's so frustrating.
And it's also a bit more kind of, weird with Max Landis because there's been no trial, there's been no criminal proceedings as yet.
Yeah, it's been the court of public opinion. Really,
so I don't mean that.
Well, obviously, believe the people who come forward and say this about him, obviously, rather than him himself. And he hasn't said anything to like defend himself. He's gone into hiding. He's gone like doing his own stuff. That's a sign of a guilty. Yeah, that's a sign of a guilty person.
Yeah, and there's 8 accusers or more. I think there's more than 8 people who've accused him.
Let's not bring this down into Max Landis territory. But yeah, it's a shame that like he was touted to do this, and the Pepe Le Pew film that he was going to write and direct. It's like
that's fitting.
Yeah, weird.
Literally the most kind of like backward, like sort of creepy cartoon character ever. Like,
yeah, especially in the current climate. Why would you want to make Pepe Le Pew the hero of a film? I don't know. Anyway, I'm very glad that it hasn't gone the route of a remake or a soft reboot like everything else is these days. But if Candyman is able to come to a new generation of people via Jordan Peele, then maybe someone, maybe not, obviously not Max Landis, but hopefully someone may be able to, I don't know, revitalize it and bring it to a new audience and capture the horror comedy the same way the original did, really.
Yeah, I don't want to completely dismiss it out of hand. I mean, like, I'm happy for them to remake movies that I like. I mean, there's a lot of movies that I love, especially in the horror genre, are remakes, like, of great movies, like The Fly is a remake. What's it? I'm trying to think of
The Thing.
The Thing is a remake, exactly.
Yeah.
John Carpenter's Thing.
It came from outer space.
Yeah, I mean, The Wizard of Oz is a remake. Do you know what I mean? It's like things like that. I don't think that.
Is it?
Yeah, I believe so. I think there was a 1910s, 1920s version of The Wizard of Oz that was less successful.
Really? That's got to be the first remake, then.
It probably is. Yeah, because everything...
That's so weird to think. I didn't even think that. Right? Okay,
because everything pre that was original, because it had to be, because cinema had only been around for like 5 minutes.
There's only one film of every genre.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So should we talk a little bit about American Werewolf in Paris? My first question, have you seen American Werewolf in Paris?
I have not.
Good.
Do I need to? Is it anything to do with this, or is it just in name only?
It's John Landis has a writing credit in terms of that. It was a character credit. As it's characters created by.
Right.
It has some of the same tropes in terms of the friends coming back to haunt them, but it's done terribly. It's just it completely misses the subtlety and the you were saying about the jump scares, the lack of jump scares in American Werewolf in terms of the the supernatural elements. There's all of that is in there, and like when the friends come back to haunt him, they have like distorted ghostly voices and stuff, when they speak, and it's really bad. I mean, it's really fun because it's kind of like one of these how the hell did this get made kind of movies, because it is so bad.
Yeah.
And it's just bizarre and like strange, and it's not.
And there's no character from it. Not the Doctor, not Jenny Agutter.
There's no mention.
Any of the Yorkshire people.
No. It's set all in Paris. It's at 3 American backpackers in Paris, and sort of they're like thrill seekers. Like they try and sort of bungee jump off the Eiffel Tower, and while they're bungee jumping off it at night, this woman tries to commit suicide, and they save her, and she turns out to be the werewolf, and it's really, she was going to commit suicide because she was a werewolf. I mean,
they don't like jump at the same time and he saves her on the bungee cord, does it?
Yes, that happens.
What?
Yeah, that actually happens. He's like, whoa, okay. And he kind of like falls over. And I think there's a Smashmouth song playing at some point.
There is not a Smashmouth song. What year was this released?
It's 97, yeah. It came out the same year as...
Oh, God, right. I thought it was going to be like 83 or something, like cash in on the popularity of the first one, but this was...
No, this was 1997, yeah. It was the same year as...
And there's a Smashmouth song.
Oh, God, it's like...
Oh, my God, that is the quintessential sign of being a 90s film, if there's a Smashmouth.
If you ever want a movie that's so bad it's good, it kind of is that, because it is good because it's so bad and it's just so misjudged, and it has it just doesn't have any of that subtle horror. It's just a slapstick comedy, basically, like, or a dark, black slapstick comedy.
Right.
It's not good. And even as a kid, like when I saw it, I was excited to see a movie with the American Werewolf in the title. So I did watch it, and it was that kind of age where, like, again, I'd probably seen American Werewolf about 3 years prior, and Alien Resurrection came out the same year. So it's kind of like, I felt like there was a lot of movies that were in the franchises that I liked. But they were both huge disappointments. As
sorry,
yeah, you're not a fan of Alien Resurrection either, are you?
Now, more so than you.
Okay.
I think because lovely Winona Ryder's in it, and it's directed by the director of Amelie, and I'm a big fan of his work. So
oh man, it looks great. It looks great. Like, I have no.
Yeah, Jean-Pierre Jeunet. I'm a big fan of him, so I appreciated what he was doing. But yeah, again, I saw it. I think that might have been the first Alien film I saw, actually.
Really?
Yeah, thinking back. So I had no context for who these people were. Yeah, exactly. But like Ron Perlman looked cool. The alien looked cool because it's like the most you see of it.
Yeah, and the CGI is not bad, to be fair.
Glistening prime. Yeah, well, apart from the hybrid at the end.
Yeah.
But even though it's not VFX, is it? It's
practical.
But yeah, that's the one. That's the word. Practical effects. Yeah. No, I was a big fan of that at the time because I had no context for anything. No, I was a fan. I was a fan.
Fair enough. Cool. Well, we will discontinue this podcast. So this will be the last episode of Mike Paul.
It's been fun, Matt.
Let's go out on a high, shall we?
Obviously. Thank you.
Bye. Yeah. No, to be fair though, I mean, like, on a serious note, like, I rewatched Alien Resurrection recently, and I think it looks fantastic. Like, there's no doubt about it. Yeah. The CGI is actually really good. Like, for its time, it still holds up pretty well.
Is that like when the alien swimming through the water?
Yeah, all those sequences, and and it's kind of not overly used in the earlier sequences as well. You see him standing in the corridors and stuff. They don't use it as much as they could have done. Considering how CGI was just so overused, like, in the late 90s and it, post Jurassic Park. But do you know what's another movie that really stands up well in terms of the CGI is Starship Troopers, man. Have you seen that recently?
Oh yeah, it's brilliant.
God.
Yeah, I have. I saw it in the cinema actually.
Really?
There was like an anniversary, or like one of my friends was working in a cinema and managed to put it on.
Oh, I thought you meant at the time. I was like, Jesus Christ, in '97 you saw that.
No, God, disturbing. God, there was no way I could stand on my tiptoes to look old enough for that film.
One, please.
But no, that exactly. It's another film that has aged very, very well, I feel.
Yeah. If you show me that CGI now, I'd be like, that's up to today's standards.
When the gigantic bug comes out of the ground and stuff, and it's very impressive stuff. Yeah. But no, it gains more appreciation from me the older I get because of the satire in it, and about how it's all war is brilliant, but every person has got like a limb missing. And just has been horribly disfigured by war, but they're all hey.
It's like a sort of a faux B movie, isn't it? I think Paul Verhoeven does these, like RoboCop.
Yeah, definitely.
It's kind of like an A budget B movie. That's like kind of the way to look at it.
No, definitely.
And it's great. So anyway, back to American Werewolf.
American Werewolf.
So on this, viewing, like as I said, we watched it just a couple of days ago together. Did you have any scenes in it that you thought were like particularly well done, or anything that stood out to you as being?
Well, obviously the transformation scene I think is fantastic to this day. Similar to when we saw Hellraiser, and I was I was blown away by a single transformation scene that kind of like made the film go from a B to an A.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's an amazing scene, that, and it really elevates the whole movie, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I love the scene of the businessman in the subway, in the tube station.
Oh yeah,
I am not an American. The tube station, being chased by the camera, and then you do see like slight hints of the werewolf. And that, for me, when I was watching it when I was young, just like, oh my God, I saw everything. I saw the whole werewolf and it is completely there. And even though it was just like the smallest bit they gave me, my mind went to town on it and just was, oh my God, it's right there and it's killing him.
It's an amazing scene, that. And it's like, like you said, it's like less is more. You really don't see hardly anything. Like, and on the VHS copy that I had when I was a kid, like the first version I had, I couldn't even see like the werewolf, in the shot where, it's from the escalators looking down and it's at the top of the frame. I don't know if it was cut off or if it was actually just distorted, so I just couldn't see it. But it just, essentially that whole scene, there was no werewolf in it for me. And it was still the creepiest scary.
Still freaked you out.
Plus, falling headfirst onto an escalator, like that's the most painful part of the whole movie. Forget getting like torn limb from limb by a werewolf. Falling headfirst at a sprint onto an escalator, like that's a great stunt. That's amazing.
That is a good stunt. Yeah. And I love how I think I watched it after I saw Spaced, the Edgar Wright TV show with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost and Jessica Stevenson, or Hines now. But the homage to American Werewolf in that, where the guy who works at the animal testing lab gets scared by Gramsci on Hampstead Heath. And just like the when I've watched it back again recently, I knew what he was going to say because I've seen that scene in Space so much.
Yeah, I can assure you this is not the least bit amusing.
Yeah, exactly. With the same accent and everything, the same posh accent, was brilliant. And I just, appreciate it even more now.
Yeah, I remember seeing that Spaced episode and just being really, really happy with that, because I didn't know, that Edgar Wright was a huge fan at that point. So I was just so glad that they put that in. And
you can see the homage to it now. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the apparently in the original cut of the movie, they had a sort of like an early screening, a test screening of the movie, and the scene where the werewolf attacked all the vagrants, like near Tower Bridge. Apparently, you don't see anything in the theatrical cut, but apparently the werewolf ripped all of the homeless people apart, like one by one, and you saw everything. Right. And apparently people were so freaked out by it. John Landis removed it, not to scare people, but because they kept talking over the next scene because it was so shocking. Oh,
because it was that impressive.
Yeah,
right?
So he thought like, he said he removed it because it's like, on the test screen, it's like, you're talking over all this exposition, like, shut up, So he took it out because he's, it was just...
That's an interesting director's cut that I'd like to see.
I would love
in a morbid way
to see all there's not too much footage that hit the cutting room floor for this, because if you read the original script, which you can actually, if you Google it, you can get the original script.
If you're a big nerd like you.
If you're a big nerd. Yeah, but if you want to, there's only 2 changes. There's scenes like that are slightly extended, with like, the sort of the amount of carnage that's actually in it. But I think the creepiest change, and the thing that would have been way more disturbing if they'd done it, maybe not as funny, but way more disturbing, is that basically when John Landis wrote the script in 1969, 70, when he'd been to London on his way to Yugoslavia to film Kelly's Heroes, and in Piccadilly Circus at that point, the Aero's cinema was a cartoon cinema in Piccadilly Circus. That it wasn't a porno cinema. In the original script, he'd written it.
Important change.
Very important change. In the original script, it was the same scene, but in the background, instead of a porn film, was a Wile E. Coyote cartoon with a sort of excessive violence on screen, and all the people in the cinema were children. So this little girl, when he starts to transform, this little girl came up to him with like a lollipop, and he says, "Go away," and he transforms, and obviously when the cops come in later, all the bodies are of children, which is like, I know, yeah. So because I just think that would be so much more kind of like
very dark turn, very Revenge of the Sith of John Landis to do
younglings everywhere, and so I'm kind of partially. I think that the porno thing is really funny, and I'm really glad that and it's great with the, when you're having this dramatic scene about between him and Jack, the skeleton and Jack, that you have this like porno on the soundtrack and like just this woman like coming in the background.
It adds to the comedy of it, doesn't it? Right? Yeah, you can either have it in a porno theater and have it be on the comedy side, or you can have it in a kids cartoon theater and have it on the horror side. And I'm glad that they went with the lighthearted way instead.
Ironically, there's actually an interesting sort of parallel that in Joe Dante's The Howling, which came out and was kind of produced simultaneously, sort of in tandem with this. The scene just before the first transformation, the one of the characters is watching a cartoon with a wolf on it, like a Looney Tunes cartoon with like a laughing sort of evil wolf character on it. So there is that kind of cartoon. Yeah. Joe Dante's a huge cartoon like nut, so that was kind of interesting to have that parallel. And that was an interesting change, and the movie that could have been
interesting. Yeah. So I think that's all we got time for today. So are you happy that we've covered everything about one of your favourite films, Matt?
Yeah, it's ever since we started the podcast, I've wanted to talk about this movie. I think it's a really unique movie. I don't think there's anything else that quite has the balance of horror and comedy and just kind of falls into either category really. And I'd recommend this to anyone, horror fans or just fans of film in general.
Fantastic. And now it is on my slate to watch An American Werewolf in Paris.
Good luck with that, mate.
That'll cheer me up. Thank you very much. So that's all we've got time for today. So say goodbye, Matt.
Bye, Matt.
And that's goodbye from me as well. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Everything everybody else tells you to do on YouTube to do to us, please do it. Like us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the whole shebang. And thank you very much for joining us here at Matt and Mike Pull Focus.